He's Bob Costas, NBC Sports, Major League Baseball Network. He joins us on the show. Bob, let me start with the poll question. One and done with the wild card. I know we sort of lacked a little bit of drama in these two games, but is it fair to have one and done with the wild card, or can we inch towards a best of three here?
Well, in one sense, it's fair because you're saying, look, you had 162 games to win your division. So if you didn't do that, even if you're the second best team in the entire league, as a wild card in some seasons will be, even if you're better than the other two division winners, you didn't win your own division at the very least. So now you're subject to this crapshoot situation, and it can be dramatic, and television likes elimination games. They like Game 5 of a best of 5 or Game 7 of a best of 7. So now all these games are one and out. So you can make an argument for that. On the other hand, the primary reason why 2 out of 3 would be appealing to me doesn't have to do with fairness for either of the wild card teams, especially not the second wild card team, which is lucky to be there to begin with. It's to further advantage the best team in the league. Theo Epstein, who used to run the Red Sox and now is trying to rebuild the Cubs, had an interesting suggestion that might kind of combine modern marketing with a more traditional idea of making it 2 out of 3, making it more fair, and giving an advantage to the first-place team. And it would be this. His idea is that you play a day-night doubleheader on the home field of the wild card team with the best record. If either team sweeps it, it's obviously over. If it's a split, the very next day, no matter the travel, you play a night game, Game 3, on the home field of the second wild card. It doesn't take that much longer, maybe one extra day. But at the same time, then when that team goes, the survivor goes to the home field of the team with the best record, they have burned at least 2 starting pitchers, maybe 3, and who knows how deep into their bullpen they've had to go to get out of the wild card round. Meanwhile, the best team in the league is sitting at home, getting a little bit of rest, certainly not enough to develop too much rust. This rust argument's ridiculous, I think, by the way. Any team would rather have the bye, not have the jeopardy of losing, and a chance to get their rotation in order while the other team is travel-weary and burning its pitchers. Now that team goes to the first-place team. Is it impossible under those circumstances for the wild card to win 3 out of 5? Of course not. They still have a good chance. They just don't have as good a chance as they otherwise would. So now you've added extra games for television. You also have the novelty of the day-night doubleheader, which would create some buzz. Even if it doesn't play out in direct TV numbers, it would be a novelty and create some buzz. And you've given a further advantage to the first-place team. So it's simultaneously traditional and modern. So I think Theo had a good idea there.
Well, my thought is I'm a little more concerned, or certainly more aware of the wild card teams getting in. They're postseason ready because they've been fighting for their lives. That we're seeing more wild card teams be a little too successful in the postseason for my liking. I still think what you do during the regular season should have a little more weight there. And if a best of 7, I think it should be 5-2 as far as home games. And if it's a best of 5, it should be 4-1. I have to have something that says you were great for a month. These teams were great for 6 months, and I still think the regular season should have a little bit more value than it does. And I don't care what sport it is. We're seeing this in football, baseball, basketball. You just get in, and those are the teams that can kind of scare you and win championships.
Well, certainly I'm with you that the regular season should have value, but what I just suggested would increase the value of the regular season. And in some cases, and the problem with this is that I'm not saying the problem, that's wrong, but an aspect of this is that each season is different. Sometimes, you're right, teams would have to fight to the finish to grab that wild card, and a first-place team might be resting on its laurels for a while. But in other years, you might go right to the end to finish first, to avoid the knockout rounds. You're playing hard just to finish first. And there are going to be some years where the wild card, be it just the single wild card, which they had at first, or now the second wild card, will enhance the drama. And then there will be other years where it will take away from the drama because the team that is the first wild card would know that even if they didn't grab that, they had the fallback of the second wild card. Every year is going to be different because there's so many possibilities. You could play it out on a computer, and you probably have an equal number of times when the extra wild card helped, and an equal number of times when it didn't, just in terms of drama.
He's Bob Costas from NBC Sports and Major League Baseball Network joining us, Dan Patrick Show. John Smoltz was on yesterday. He said if you had a fantasy draft now and you were able to start your team with anybody, he said he would start his team with Clayton Kershaw.
I couldn't argue with that. Now, he comes from a pitcher's perspective, but Clayton Kershaw, for the moment, is more than just the best pitcher in baseball. He's clearly the best starting pitcher in baseball. He's led the major leagues, not the National League, although obviously in the National League ERAs tend to be lower anyway, but he's led the major leagues in earned run average 3 consecutive years. The only guys to do that, if I recall correctly, are Lefty Grove, Sandy Koufax, and Greg Maddux. Plus, he's left-handed, and that matters a lot. He happens to pitch in a good pitcher's park, which helps him. He goes deep into games. The complete game is close to extinct these days, but he's a guy who'll give you 7, 8 innings and the occasional complete game and shutout. He's a good all-round athlete. He's a tremendous influence in the clubhouse. So that's a good choice.
We got Mike Trout on next hour.
Yeah, that could be another choice.
and it was one of those, oh, by the way, you didn't answer it, though. Who would you take?
I'll go with Kershaw. I'll go with that.
Really? Over Trout and Harper?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I just don't want to tick Smoltz off.
Oh, who cares about Smoltz? I wouldn't worry about him.
All right, I'll reconsider.
There you go. When's the last time you had an athlete mad at you?
An athlete? I can't really remember. I think they take their complaints in private. No one wants to square off with me face to face. You know that.
Have you ever been? And you've been doing this a long time. And when you sit down to do an interview, when somebody says you can't ask about this, how do you respond?
I think it depends upon the circumstance. If it's a league official, a commissioner, if there are important issues in play, then you don't accept that condition. But I'll give you one that happened recently. Yasiel Puig does not like to talk about the circumstances surrounding his defection from Cuba. And actually, that's increased the mystique around him. And so we were able to grab him for an interview through an interpreter, but he spoke a little bit of English in the interview, and you saw his big smile and how attractive he can be. And one of their conditions was ask him anything but nothing about the defection from Cuba. And I thought about it, and I said, this is just for the baseball fan to get to know Puig. They haven't seen him be interviewed. This isn't Meet the Press. I'll accept it under those circumstances. But if it were a really compelling issue, you couldn't do it.
Yeah, I find it difficult, and sometimes they'll tell you it right before you do an interview.
Yeah.
I had a chance with Barry Bonds, this is years ago, in spring training, where Bonds came out and said he's going to try to change his personality. So I had Fritzy call the Giants. I said, let's have Bonds on. Right before he comes on the phone, we're told, oh, by the way, you can't ask him about any performance-enhancing drugs or any, okay, what am I, we talked about home security systems that he installs. Like, he's really big into that. I'm going, what just happened? I got Bonds here. Granted, he doesn't want to talk about it, but I still have to ask the elephants in the room here.
Yeah.
But it's kind of tough when they hit you that 11th hour with something like that.
They should never do that. That's not cool. Athletes have handlers now, and they spring that on you at the last minute. And it's a condition that you really can't accept because that is the elephant in the room with Bonds. That's also, you've reminded me, the answer to your previous question. When I flatly stated that Barry Bonds clearly, I think the way I put it was, I believe Barry Bonds has used steroids because I live on this planet. I mean, how much more evidence do you need? And this is when he was approaching Hank Aaron. And I happened to be in Milwaukee, and the Giants were playing the Brewers, and he was back in the clubhouse, and their local television broadcast was on, and the local guys had asked me to stop by for an inning. So they asked me about Bonds, and he heard what I had to say, and then he went off on me, but that's fine. The facts are what the facts obviously are, and if saying something that's clearly true and needed to be bluntly said gets somebody mad at you, well, you got to live with that.
What about A-Rod with and I don't know what's fact or fiction here, but here he is. He says he's fighting for his life, which, God help us, may we all fight for our lives at $25 million a year, but he's fighting for his life. And now he says, reportedly he didn't know what he was taking at the time with biogenesis.
Boy.
It's hard to
I
get.
think that A-Rod has every right to fight the severity of the suspension, and ultimately that's where this is going to wind up, almost certainly. He'll say that, look, no matter what you believe I've done, it isn't that much worse than what Ryan Braun or anyone else did. It's disproportionate, and I think that's where it's ultimately headed. I don't think, given, and I don't think A-Rod's the biggest villain in the world. There's some piling on here, and once somebody's been labeled a certain way, people delight in interpreting their every action as something negative. I don't feel negatively toward A-Rod in that way. But I would say this. The guy apparently sought out Anthony Galea. He and other prominent athletes. You can go to anybody in the entire country, anybody in the world will take your phone call. Anybody. You're dealing with Anthony Galea. You can go anywhere if you wanted anti-aging products. Get some nice anti-aging cream to help the wrinkles, whatever it is you want. You can go anywhere you want. You go on to Anthony Bosch. Eventually, it doesn't look good. Circumstantially, it doesn't look very good.
I saw where there's a mothership's going to do a 30 and 30 on the Spirits of St. Louis, the old ABA team, and you got the opportunity to be the play-by-play voice. I think, were you coming out of college that you were the play-by-play voice?
I had worked for 6 months in Syracuse, where I went to college. I'd worked at the NBC affiliate in Syracuse for 6 months, and then I hopped to St. Louis to do the Spirits. I was 22.
I visited Marvin Barnes in prison. This is years ago, and he's obviously a very colorful guy, and
he's really funny, isn't he?
He had a great sense of humor. Here's a 6'9" guy, in prison garb, and he does have a sense of humor at the time when he's telling all these stories that happened at Providence and certainly in the ABA. But I think he's going to come out of this as the star of the 30 and 30 when people see sort of the character. I think he said he was playing basketball and pimping at the same time when he was playing in the ABA. Were you aware of the one part of this?
Well, I wasn't aware of all the particulars. I was aware that he was kind of he fashioned a kind of superfly image, which was of that time, and he was so irresistibly funny. He was like a lowercase Muhammad Ali. He was just really funny, and any of his conceit always played in an amusing and attractive way. None of us disliked Marvin. We shook our heads at how self-destructive he was. I don't think you could find a knowledgeable basketball guy who wouldn't have said that if Marvin Barnes had stayed on the straight and narrow or even anything close to it and hadn't been injured, that he would have been one of the 50 greatest players in NBA history when they named that group in 1997 at the 50th anniversary of the league. He was that good. There were nights when I saw him outplay Moses Malone head-to-head, outplay Dr. J head-to-head. He was that good.
I look forward to it. Good to visit with you and talk to you this weekend.
Okay, Dan, thanks.
Thank you, Bob. Bob Costas, NBC Sports.
The Dan Patrick Show, weekday mornings on Audience.